Hello, everybody. I am with I am Remy Kylis, and with me I have Chrisiousity. Hello, Chrisiousity.
Hi, Rin. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thanks for being on. Do you want to share your views with the audience on what you believe in?
Sure. So I am a feminist, and I am a leftist, I guess is the more than left leaning, let's say. I am firmly on the left politically. So I guess that should tell you what you need to know, I guess.
Okay, so what was it like being at MidCon? I mean, were you excited to go? I mean, was it better than what you expected? Was it worse than what you expected?
Um, I At this point that I am glad that I went, I was kind of apprehensive. I've never been on stage before. I've never been in a panel before. I am a pretty quiet person who just sits behind a computer screen most of the time. Even when I do real world activism, like I do marches and things, but I'm usually like you'll find me helping out selling t-shirts or something. I'm not up on a stage doing speeches or anything like that. Um, so that was sort of that part was a bit nerve-wracking. I didn't know what the vibe there was going to be like because there were a lot of anti-feminists and most for the most part I would say it was fine. I chose not to go to one of the parties that they had just because I felt uncomfortable there because of where it was and who was hosting it and all that. But other than that, I pretty much did all the things and it was, it was all right. It was fine. It was a very anti-feminist crowd at MythCon itself. And sometimes that was a little tense, but whatever. It's all good, right?
Yeah, I did watch the live stream, and you did try to. Well, the audience was clearly biased. I mean, I noticed that you tried to pitch your idea, and then everybody started laughing. Only for later you went on Twitter and you shared where your ideas came from. Like, you weren't, making it up. There was
Right.
actually something to support your idea.
Oh yeah, there's quite a few sources when it comes to infant mortality and in the Black community because they've actually, and I guess I kind of knew this a little bit more than most people because I worked in the medical field for a bit. So I know that this is something that's been puzzling researchers for a while because they knew, of course, that there was a high infant mortality rate, and that's terrible. It's just an awful thing. Um, and at first, they felt, well, it was probably just down to things like prenatal care and lack of access to good medical assistance in certain communities, and so they tried to fix for that. But they realized, even though that does help, it didn't fix the problem, which is to say that a Black woman and a white woman who have everything else, they live in the same neighborhood, they have the same care and treatment and doctor and prenatal vitamins, and there's still a gap there. There's still a problem. It's not as stark, but it still exists. And so that's then a group of researchers actually went to Africa to see if they could see if there was some sort of genetic issue, and there isn't. There's nothing genetically there. So that's when they said, well, what are we missing? What is it that Black women in America face that Black women in Africa don't face? And then there's a fairly obvious answer. And that's when they started looking at racism and sexism and the kinds of stresses that that can put on a person's body, on their, and that is a concept called allostatic load. So, and this isn't about being weak or being unable to handle stress. It's stress in our modern age is a huge problem, and we all know that. And it's a problem that affects humans physically. Like, there's no way to stop it. You can be as tough as anybody, but repeated, constant stressors will wear your body down because that's just how your body works. You know, you have these hormones that are released, you have these, your heart rate will increase, and this just over time can cause serious issues. And because of the way that pregnancy works, that it gets passed on to your baby to some degree or another. Even the like even the male father who passes on his genetic material to the baby has some impact, but it's just much more so for the for whoever is carrying the child, the person who's pregnant.
Yeah, it was an interesting read. There's a little Twitter discussion on it, started by, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but Ankh. But Ankh, like just tag me and a bunch of other people to a thread where we talked about the article, and the
Mm,
article was like, oh yeah, like we did, went to West Africa and we try to see if it's something in the genes, and they rolled that out, and it was a very interesting read.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that a lot of people are aware of it, which is, I guess, that was my, if I had realized that the awareness wasn't there, I guess, and that probably comes down to me being, of knowing about it as a person who was sort of a medical assistant and worked in doctors' offices and knew the kind of conversations that doctors have been having. Um, I would have probably approached it differently when I brought it up. You know, I guess I should have known that that it would have been taken as very, like, a very bizarre claim or a very out there claim when it really is not. So I don't know. I guess I'm not at all sad that I did bring it up. I'm glad that if there isn't awareness, that I did something to raise some degree of awareness there, and maybe that people can sort of take that and go with it. And so, like I said, I when I got back, I went onto Twitter and I got all these sources that explain what was going on and where I got these claims from, and showing I didn't just make it up. This isn't my claim. This is something that's been going on and people have been looking at for years.
Yeah, yeah, I think that some people probably thought you made it up, but or got it from everyday feminism, or yeah, or got it from like an opinion piece, like with like, or like look at the opinion piece of Slate's magazine. People are like,
Mm,
oh, you probably just got it from everyday feminism, or you probably just got it from an opinion piece of Slate, or
mm.
you know, yeah, so I just thought that that was very interesting. Uh, my mind is drawing a blank right now.
Oh yeah, because now I'm on my laptop and all my sources are on my other computer, but I can send them to you later, and then you can put them in the description in case anybody else is interested in looking them up.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Sure. So talking about MythCon more in general, I guess, there were I'm glad that I wore sunglasses out there because I think that actually helped. I wore them because I'm still I'm not out there with my full name and I don't want to be necessarily doxed or identified. So that's what the sunglasses were for because of anonymity. Um, but the good part about it is I couldn't see the audience very well. And like other people who were able to see them, like for instance, Vadim, who was also there, he was like, it was amazing because every time you would talk, there were people who would just go, "Ah," like they were really angry, and just like raising fists and things. Like I couldn't even see them, so it didn't. Like I could tell, obviously, that there was a lot of noise going one way, but it didn't affect me because oh
Yeah,
well.
there does seem to be a bit of a heckler's veto there. Like there's a bunch of hecklers there because it's kind of sometimes when I'm watching MidCon, you could just hear somebody shouting, just shouting at the people on stage.
Yeah. I think that Dave Smalley really he was the moderator and he did shut the audience down when they started trying that. And he said, "No, we're not doing that. Stop." Like, and that was good, I thought.
Yeah, I think so too. But I'm surprised that they didn't have any security guards to deal with hecklers. Because like when you are heckling, you make it hard for everybody else to hear. So I'm surprised because I didn't know that I didn't notice that like with celebrities. I know that's going to be a smaller venue or whatnot, but I do
Mhm.
notice that with celebrities, if there are hecklers in the audience, the hecklers would be escorted out.
Yeah, I think that I was told that there were a couple of security guards who went around and gave a couple of people um, the ones who had like fists going or whatever, um, gave them warnings. I don't think anybody was put out. I felt like the security did a good job. I'm gonna, I'll tell you a story um, of when I sat down and I was watching the first panel, right? And that was Dave Smalley and Vadim and Armored Skeptic and everything. And I was right up front because we were like, oh, we should give Vadim friendly faces to look at. Let's get right up there. So because we knew it was like very one-sided, so at least he would have some sort of support going, yay. So that's what we did, and me and the Messianic Manic and some other people who were on more on the left. And then it got to a point where, and I have some like anxiety issues around certain specific things. And Dave Smalley had said something about not believing rape victims or being skeptical towards rape victims. And this got like a hero's applause, like not just like, oh, we agree with you, but just like, woohoo, yeah. Like, and it was really loud. And I got very anxious and upset. And so I just like I got out of my chair and I just flipped the audience off and walked out um, because I was very emotional. Like um, Dave Smalley said afterwards that he could see that I was like literally shaking and just trembling all over because of just the intensity of the reaction of that. So and I was gonna leave. I was like, "Oh fuck this! Why did I come here? This was a huge mistake. I'm leaving. I'm out of here." Right. And on my way out the door, there were these three security guards. And one of them comes up to me and just says really nicely, he goes, Miss, you look very pretty in your dress. Like he could tell I was upset and he was just trying to make me feel better. And it was so sweet that like it stopped me and it put me in a different mood. And I was like, okay, okay. Um, and these and then, you know, the other security cards. And these were obviously, these are people who've worked together for a while. It was two black guys and a black lady. And they're all just sort of chilling and hanging out. And, you know, and then we were talking back and forth for a few minutes um, and just, you know, I was talking with the lady about clothes and stuff and where we get our clothes. And then I was like, all right, I'm better. so so then I decided to I didn't go back into the stage to watch any more of the panel because that would not have worked out. But I went down into the green room, and that's when I talked to some people who were there, and I just said I'd really like to talk to Dave Smalley before I go on stage with them, and we did. So we talked that through, and we also talked it out on my channel as well afterwards. That was just sort of a deal that we made. So yeah.
So like when you got really emotional and flipped off the audience, is that related to your anxiety, or is it because you've probably gotten raped in the past, like you were raped or
Well,
molested as a child, or I mean we don't
yeah.
have to go into that if you don't want to.
Yeah, no, it is. That is, well, that's where the anxiety comes from, is the experiences that I've had. Um, one which happened when I was very young, when I was a child, and one that happened years and things that happened years afterwards as well. So yeah, it's extremely it's a visceral reaction. You know, it your body kind of goes into this fight or flight mode, and it's not something that I can necessarily control. I'm better, you know, but it's known that rape victims have really intense post-traumatic reactions a lot, and that it's a long-lasting problem. So it's just a thing, and it, you know, it doesn't really affect my life for the most part. And it was just sort of, if you had, I know that people in the audience wouldn't think about that. They wouldn't think about if somebody's here who has been raped before, this is going to sound terrifying to them like, and awful. Like they're surrounded with people who are just anti-rape victim, you know, just cheering, whoa, you know. I know that they don't think of it that way, and that's not how they're processing it, and not even something going through their mind. But it's really extremely difficult.
Oh, sorry. I was just checking chats.
Oh,
I just, checking chat because I noticed that I haven't looked at chats at all. Uh, yeah, but yeah, I was questioning like your reaction because I figured that because of the way you've reacted, that maybe just maybe that you probably got raped as a child or whatnot, and that's it's kind of like that was probably a stressor that's, just I don't know, just brought up bad memories.
oh
I
yeah.
don't I don't think that these people hates rape victims. I just think that they don't want a man's life to be destroyed over a potential lie, because I mean when you watch anti-feminist content, they would show, scenarios of, where it would turn out that, that the like I believe it was the lacrosse team where it turned out to be fabricated because, there was enough evidence to show that Delu Cross team was innocent the whole time.
Yeah, no one is disregarding that false rape accusations can happen. Right now, we have a situation in the United States um, where rape and sexual assault aren't being taken seriously enough. And for instance, you have the rape kits. I think this has become more well publicized, and people probably know about, just literally hundreds of thousands of untested rape kits. And when they do test them, what they often find is that there are serial rapists out there. There are people whose DNA shows up in multiple of these rape kits. And had they tested them at the time, they would probably have been able to find that out and do the investigation that they should have done a long time ago, but they didn't. And they just sort of, it literally takes hours for a rape kit to be assembled. It's invasive, and for a person who's already gone through hell and who is doing all the supposedly right things of going to the hospital and talking and saying what happened and doing that in a very timely fashion. um, like, these are all the things you're supposed to do to be a good rape victim. And when you've done that and it's still just tossed on a shelf somewhere, never tested, not looked at. I think the worst story that I heard along those lines was a woman who someone had broken into her house, her apartment rather, and raped her in the night. And what she was saying to them is she believed she knew who did it because it was her landlord. And she said, the reason I think it was my landlord is I had just told him that that there was a window that was broken that needed to be fixed because I couldn't lock it. And that was the window that was used. She said the person who came in knew where everything in the house was walking around like they knew the place. And she's like, I don't have like men in my life that are, have that kind of familiarity with my apartment. And they didn't do anything about that. The rape kit got tested, didn't get tested. Eventually it was, and eventually it was tested. This was years after the fact. Um, and they found out it was in fact this landlord, and that landlord had gone on to rape other women. And because of nobody doing what the cops are supposed to do, this just other people were hurt and it was completely unnecessary. So that's the problem that we find ourselves in today. And that's why a lot of people are coming forward and saying, look, we've got to start listening to women and we've got to start taking their stories seriously. And we've got to start taking sexual assault more seriously and rape more seriously. And we have to deal with this. For too long, there's a lot of women don't come forward because there's no point to going forward. The only thing that you'll do is hurt yourself more. You're not going to get justice, and people know that, and that's not an acceptable place to be in. If we're generally going to say that we hate rape and we think it's a terrible crime, we actually have to treat it that way more. Like, we have to kind of put our money where our mouth is as far as that's concerned. That doesn't mean that when people talk about listen and believe, which isn't a thing that I came up with, right? What they're really saying is listen and take women seriously. Take people seriously who come forward, men as well, with these stories. And um, like, for the most part, like, if I come to you, um, or if somebody comes up to you and says my house was broken into and a bunch of stuff got stolen, nobody goes, well, let's see about that. I don't know. Do you have evidence that this actually happened? Like, are you sure? Like, like they're not treated with this heightened degree of skepticism that's really just, it's kind of toxic. It's a toxic degree of skepticism because it keeps more people from coming forward. They see other people getting harassed or badly treated who do come forward. If you look at Christine Ford right now, she's unable to go back to her house. Her family is in hiding. Has death threats all the time. People see that and they're like, fuck, no. So that's why I think we're in the situation that we're in, that finally people are talking about it and bringing stuff forward. And we're finding that there are people who've been basically, people like Weinstein in Hollywood, who have been basically just serial rapists for years. People knew about it and nobody did anything about it, because that was part of the culture. Hey. Hello.
I'm here. I'm here. You brought up a lots of different points. When it comes to what was it that there's rape kits and it hasn't been was it not used for years or not tested
Mhm.
for years. I do think that that comes down to probably incompetence. I think it's probably going to fall down on incompetence because I don't think that your general American citizen would know about it. Like, I don't think that if you ask your average everyday American citizen, that they would know that there's going to be untested rape kits sitting on the shelf for years, especially since I remember looking at C-SPAN
Mhm.
and it was like Terry Crews, and he was talking about government subsidizing rape kits, and many people seemed to be in favor of it. Like I think Philip DeFranco mentioned it on his channel, and Philip DeFranco's like, "Yes, about time." And I went through the comment section, and I read as many comments as I could, and many people seem to be in favor of substance government subsidized rape kits make it easily affordable, such as I don't think that your average American knew about the level of incompetence that it would take to leave a rape kit untested and on a shelf for years where you could get a rapist off the streets but to do nothing at all about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, well, that's why feminists are there, and that's why we brought it up, like that's why people like Samantha Bee were putting it out on their shows, and that's why, feminists were bringing stuff forward. That's what we do. So, um, it's bring awareness to the problem. Prior to that, I'm certain that there wasn't a widespread awareness of the issue, even though it was like it impacts multiple different states and counties and cities. And, it wasn't like a problem that was in one small area or one or two police departments. It was very widespread. So, but the more that we talk about it, because the American public, I do think, would have had the expectation that if you went through all of the right things as a victim, that you should at least have your claims investigated, and properly investigated. And that isn't something that has been happening. And that's been a problem, but it's been a problem sort of on the down low. And part of it is incompetence, as you say, and another part is, they've done tests on cops, and many cops, of course, are very serious about catching criminals. But then there are a lot of other cops who don't have, who believe in, various rape myths that are out there, or who have attitudes. Cops are humans just as much as everybody else is. So sometimes that comes down to a lack of further training in this area. and knowing what the best practices are. I on my thing with Dave Smalley, I had brought out a report from Sheriff Magazine or something like that, like an internal um, magazine for police officers or whatnot, and they were talking about sort of these problems and about how they've come now. They have a better understanding of the ways to go about it. There was a military psychologist and involved in, I don't know, these things, and he developed certain ways that you can interview people better and interview victims better, interview potential uh, suspects better and get better and more information. And it's a little different when you're dealing with people who have been traumatized, so that you have to be aware of you're not necessarily talking to them in exactly the same way as you would just somebody off the street who hadn't been horribly traumatized. So it's that sort of thing. Like I think it's getting worked on. Like it's getting there, and we're just keeping trying to keep the pressure on so that it doesn't fall to the wayside again, so that it does, so that there is follow through, and that the things that people know that are best practices for law enforcement are put into place, and there is an oversight there. You know, citizen oversight, I think, is very important to law enforcement.
Yeah, it does seem to come down to incompetence. Like maybe like police training could last longer. Like maybe police training is too short.
Well, my understanding is they go through what they go through, right? They go through the training process, and then they're cops, and they don't necessarily have ongoing education the way that there is an expectation. For instance, if you're in the medical field, um, you go through all the training that you go through, but you still, it's part of the expectation of you as a medical professional. And this is at all levels, from doctor to surgeon to anybody, to um, continually educate and inform yourself, and to go through more trainings and learn more things. You know, it's not like, okay, now you're in it, now you've passed the test, you're on the job, that's it. Like, and I don't think that my understanding based on what I've read from cops is that that's not necessarily something that they do. It's not even necessarily something that they have available to them always. You know, I mean, it's so because they haven't necessarily prioritized ongoing training and education. And you know what? Like, you, part of that is that you forget stuff, right? You're on the job, and like, if I tried to remember everything that I learned from the classes I took before I took the test to get, like, to be a medical assistant, right? I couldn't. I don't know, like, but if you keep going back, then you remember, and you go, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, it's still fresh in your mind. Whereas if you never go back, then you don't. Then you're not going to necessarily keep that fresh, and it's, you may have been taught the right thing, but you were taught it 10, 15 years ago, and you know, it's kind of gone now. You know, it's not at the forefront of your mind. So I think that's one of the things. You know, I mean, we're getting into um like different territory here on how we would work with this, but
Yeah, like, oh, I've heard of this before. Like, I've spoken to an electrician, and the electrician I was talking to, he was like going back to school to be an electrician, even though he already was electrician, but he went back to school to, keep himself updated and, like even with office administration, this person just keeps buying more and more books to just stay updated in her field. And I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying, keep it updated and, like, honestly, like, with how bad some of these drivers are, I would wish that many of them would just get their, take a driver's test again because some people are really bad at drivers. It's like, how did you get your license in the first place? Can't you, like, retake the test again because you drive really horribly?
Yeah.
Like the people who
Yeah.
are about to run you off the road.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, I guess that's my spiel about that. Let's say we should probably talk about something a little less intense. I had a lot of fun at MythCon getting to know certain people. Let's see, I hung out, like I said, with Vadim, obviously with Mike Rowlands, the Messianic Manic, who's an atheist YouTuber. I hung out with Poisoning the Well, Sophane and Fat Pat. Um, and they were cool. Um, let's say they bought me a shot before I was supposed to go on stage, like here, this will help. It's like, all right, cool. Um, yeah, so did I tell you about Hunter Avalone?
No, you didn't. Go ahead.
Because to me, this was a funny story. So when we sat down right before it started, before Vadim's panel, um, Hunter Avalone, he comes and he sits next to us. And like, how you know who someone is and you can't place them? Like, I'm looking at someone going, this guy looks familiar. He's got the shy one in the boy band kind of look going on. And I know I've seen him before. So I'm kind of like looking at him, probably funny. And he's like, hi, I'm Hunter Avalone. And I was like, oh, okay, hi. And then he looks and he says, um, don't be upset, don't be offended. But if I see some other YouTubers, I'll probably leave and go sit next to them. We were like, all right, because obviously we're both other YouTubers, but it's fine. Well, I don't expect Hunter Avalone is checking out my channel, right? So, or necessarily the Messianic Manics either. Um, so that happened, and he does end up going and leaving and hanging out with, I don't know, somebody else, probably Shoe on Head, but I can't remember. So anyway, uh, later on, after everything, and we were at the after party, he comes up to me and he's like shaking my hand and saying, that was so great that you came. Nobody has ever explained intersectionality to me the way that you did. And I was like, he was like, I was so, that was so cool. I'm glad you came and I'm glad you did it. And I was like, that's so funny to me that he was, I do think a lot of people do have this thing when they're anti-feminists that they get their information from other anti-feminists and they haven't necessarily had things explained. What is intersectionality and where does it come from? Like, and what are people talking about? Like, so I'm not saying all anti-feminists are like that, but a lot of times it's like you have to go to the sources, and by the sources I don't mean necessarily BuzzFeed, like you have to go and see where does this come from in the first place before you can really evaluate it. So it just struck me as funny. He was nice though. He was quite sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, like, when I very first heard of what's the intersectional feminism, I
Mhm.
was getting all of my information from anti-feminist sources. So it's kind of a lot like, oh yeah, so like, being into social justice, like I was also one of those people like, oh, it means like that you like to yell at people and you like to scream at people and dye your hair strange colors until like was like, I am a social justice advocate. Then I was thinking, well, it's weird to be an advocate for yelling and screaming. So it's kind yeah, so it's like, well, you can't, nobody's going to be a yelling and screaming advocate. So I Googled social justice. And when I Googled social justice, Google says it involves the redistribution of wealth.
Mm. Um, yeah, I would say that it generally does. Like, it would depend on the society that you live in. So, all right. So, John Rawls, he literally wrote the book on social justice, right? He's a philosopher, and he had this thought experiment. Am I telling you something you already know? Like, am I going to bore you if I tell you this? Wait.
John, who is the philosopher?
Yeah, his name is John Rawls. He was a very important philosopher. He's dead now. Um, but he wrote a book called, I don't know, Social Justice something. I can't remember the title. I'm very bad with names and titles generally. So, but he had a thought experiment, right? And so it was called the veil of ignorance. So imagine that you and several other people woke up tomorrow with no knowledge of who you are in terms of your age, your race, your gender, your how much money you have, whether you're healthy or sick or where you live, like nothing, you know nothing, right? You could be um, an elderly black um, trans person, or you could be a rich white dude, um, or a disabled person, or anybody you don't know. Nobody in the room knows what um, what their position is, and what you're told is from this veil of ignorance, from not knowing who you are or what your status in society is or any of these things, you're told, okay, you're the ones who get to make up the rules. You're going to make up society's rules now. And he said if people didn't know what their risks and benefits were, what would they want to have put into place? And what he believed that you would, if you could seriously take this on, most people would choose both to have protections in place for people who were poor or sick, um, protections against discrimination in case of being sort of a racial minority or religious minority or whatever. And but they would also want a way to sort of um, to motivate people to excellence, and so he came up with it. It was basically like a fairly liberal society is what he believed. Like other people might have a different point of view on what that would mean or what they would want to see. um, but that was sort of his idea of it. So that was sort of the start of that was sort of a philosophical touchstone of social justice. Not that people didn't care about other people before or whatever, but this is more along the lines of sort of a humanist perspective on social justice. Whereas prior to that, like it used to be that in America, the Quakers were some of the most interested in social justice, but they came to it from a religious perspective. and a spiritual perspective. And sometimes that, you know, um, because they did really good things like fighting for abolition of slavery and giving women the right to vote, but they also did some things like getting. They were the ones that put in the well, not just them, but they were major influencers on putting prohibition of alcohol in place. Because they had a very religious and even kind of a strict um, lifestyle around being Christian in their perspective of what that meant. So, um, so this was more of a secular idea of where you would get the idea of social justice and equality for people. Um, and so that's kind of where that was the start of a lot of things. Secular humanism has been very important. Um, and feminist thought, queer theory, all of these things, all of these different studies that have come forward and talked about different things, race studies, uh, have looked at these problems for many years and done studies and developed theories and different things. So it's like, so there's this enormous body of work, philosophical work, academic work, sociological work that people are drawing from. And if you're talking about a concept like social justice, intersectionality, things like that. So it's sort of important to understand where it's coming from. If you want to combat it, if you think that it's either gone wrong or gone in a bad direction, it's still important to sort of actually deal with the concept as it is, right? And not like just necessarily listen to what an anti-feminist YouTuber had to say about it and then going from there, because you're not getting a full story of what other people are even talking about. And then when you try to talk about people who are social justice advocates, they just look at you and go, what the hell is, what are you even talking about? Like, why are you so obsessed with people who have blue hair and yell? Who gives a shit? Like, like what are we even discussing here? So there's a real issue of just people talking past one another. They're not talking to each other. They're not even talking about the same thing half the time.
It sounds like you're referencing the Sargon Richard Carrier debate.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, because it's kind of a lot like, it seems like Sargon, I had to agree with Richard Carrier. It does seem like Sargon just, is obsessed with loud internet activists. When social justice, from when I Googled it, social justice is justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within society. So Richard Carrier doesn't have to storm off the stage or believe that racism equals prejudice plus power to be in favor of social justice.
No, those are other um, those are other issues, and that's another problem is that, like for instance, Anarcho-Pac recently did a rebuttal to Ben Shapiro's thing about intersectionality, and what she had pointed out was Ben Shapiro isn't even talking about intersectionality here. What Ben is talking about is probably, it sounds like standpoint theory, which is a different theory. It comes from sort of feminist thinking as well, but it's a different set of concepts. So, like in talking about racism as being racism is prejudice and power, sort of the combination of those two things, which is how some academics would, and some activists would combine it. You don't have to, like, that's not something, like, for instance, I'll use either definition as long as we've decided which definition we're using. Like, if you want to use sort of the more colloquial definition of racism as just being hatred or disparagement or discrimination against people based on their skin color or their perceived race, then I don't have a problem using that definition. I know that there are other definitions that are out there, and they have important things to say as well, because it does matter in a society whether or not, like, I could be a black person can be as prejudiced against a white person as they want to be, and they can be annoying for it, and but they can't necessarily do anything about it in terms of policy or in terms of getting their racism, across in society. Like, it's just them being annoying is the best that they can, is the best that they've got going on for that, right? There's not a social, societal consequence that's necessarily going to come about from just a black guy who happens to be racist against white people, right? So I think that's an important thing to look at when you're looking at racism, as, who has the ability to actually do something about their attitudes and who doesn't. So that is sort of like a different piece of the puzzle to me. But I can use either definition. Like, I don't care. Like, as long as people are understanding what people are talking about. Another thing is, I don't use white supremacy the way that some activists do when I'm talking to people who aren't activists or academics, because I know that it's just going to get misunderstood and people are going to get upset. And that doesn't just seem like a thing that there's a big point for me. I don't care how other people use it. You can use different definitions for things when you're talking about different things. It doesn't bother me. I just think it's important to understand what you're talking about and make sure everybody knows. And I think when you say white supremacy, it's such an emotional word for people. Like, I don't blame people for getting their hackles up when you're talking about that, because it is a terrible thing that has happened in our country, and so people maybe aren't um, ready to just sort of talk about it in an unemotional, logical fashion, and I get that. So
White supremacy is attached to Adolf Hitler and the KKK. So I do have to agree with what's his name, David Smalley, or the medical guys, where it seems like you're taking an ugly word and redefining a very ugly word to mean something else. And go, no, 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 no. Like, this is what white supremacy really is. When even Wikipedia, your average Wikipedia article would say that no, like a white supremacist is like a person in the KKK who wants to lynch black people, and your average white person isn't going to want to be called a white supremacist because they don't want to lynch black people.
right, right.
And
That's why
and
I don't personally use it that way. Like, I own, if I'm saying you're talking about somebody having um, white supremacist views, I mean that they are pretty much in the KKK, or they're Nazis, or they're people who would want an ethno state or something like that. I'm not talking about sort of the more generic idea of it. I do understand that there are some people who are, like I said, words and terms. Like, I don't get upset when people um, add meanings to different words for different situations, because that's what language is for. It's meant to just change, but it doesn't, like, I just I think that's fine as long as people understand it, like what people are saying. But I know for a fact that people do not understand what you're saying, what a lot of people are saying when they use that term in a different way, because they're so, because it's such a terrible word and such an extreme word. Like they just don't even, like, I've tried to tell people, like, okay, I know you just saw a black activist use this word in a way that didn't make any sense to you. I can tell you what they were talking about. I can get you to understand where they were coming from, and they don't even want to hear it because it's like, what the fuck is it's like an emotional thing, and I get that. Like, I don't. It doesn't bother. But the problem then becomes, again, we're talking past each other. Like, we're not talking to each other. We're not making any sense. We're not having a conversation. This person is talking about a totally different thing than you are, and like refusing to understand where the other person is coming from and what the argument is not going to help anybody. So I don't know what to do about that because it is what it is. I can't tell people what words to use or what meanings they're allowed to have or not allowed to have. You know what I mean? Like, it's not up to me. I can only try to understand where different people are coming from when
Yeah,
they.
I do think people shoot themselves in the foot using hyperbole.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's kind of across the board, you know? Like a lot of times anti-feminists are extremely hyperbolic about things, and it makes it very difficult to have a conversation, with them, um, because they don't seem to be it comes across as not speaking in good faith sometimes when you're so hyperbolic. So I can understand that.
Yeah, bad faith arguments can occur from both sides. And let's see, I think that you said earlier that Black people can't support policy. I think what you mean is that Black people represent 13% of the US population, and 13% of the US population can't support widespread changes. Because, I mean, if of course, say a black cop could mistreat, say, a white person, that's possible, or a black landlord could
Sure.
kick a white person out, of an apartments building.
Mm. Yeah. So, that is, in those cases, that would be different. And it sort of depends if you're looking at things, what lens you're looking at things from. If you're looking at things from a policy lens, that's no big deal. Sorry, for some reason my speakers are being weird for me. My headphones. I think I should be fixed. Does things sound good to you,
Oh,
Rin?
yeah, sure.
Sorry. Yeah, my headphones are kind of conking in and out on me, and they're probably just uh, uh, probably just being weird. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. Should we talk about something more cheerful? Hey,
Uh,
I know you did. I know you probably are sick of talking about um Sargon, but he's been a train wreck.
yeah, like, oh, have you seen, him with, he was talking to, like, what, Mr. Medicare and Ethan Ralph, like, he was on, like, the Kill Stream. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not,
Yeah, I did see it. It was amazing. Like, I have no idea how do you get that clueless about something? What are you talking about, dude?
yeah, I mean, it was, like, really, really funny, and I mean,
Um,
Mr. Medicare Mr. Medicare, he had me laughing, Mr. Medicare, he had me laughing really, really hard. I was just laughing throughout the whole entire stream. He's like, "What we're going to do is that we're going to get Donald Trump to, like, defend Gamergate," and it's like and people were like, what are you talking about?" It's like he's got better things to do. He only talks about current events. Yeah, I mean, that was really I mean, the Kim stream, that was a really, very fun stream. I think it was called, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was the one that was called The Stepfather. I think that came from Mr. Medicare. I think he
all
gave
right,
Mr. Circle that name.
so Rin, to me, you're sounding like a a robot. So,
Oh, I do?
uh, I'm not getting. Can you? Yeah,
Oh,
let me ask the chat. Is anybody there? Is there I
oh,
don't know what's
this guy, I don't know, could anybody say, if we sound bad, if I sound like a robot, or if Chrisiousity has, audio problems?
says sounds like a robot and Chrisiosity sounds like an NPC. Um,
Possibly, I don't know what to do about it because I am using cheap cell phone headphones, and
mm,
I'm using a laptop I recently bought some about last month from Office Depot.
mm, yeah. All right, well, that's fine. So I think we sound fine now, he says, so that's cool. All right, no, so we were talking about sorry, like
Mr. Medicare is amazing. I mean, I don't know a lot about the guy. Like, I've been watching Mr. Medicare recently, but he has been having me laughing. I mean, he has me laughing like a lunatic. I mean, I would just be laughing so hard that I am about to cry because Mr. Whitaker is like so funny. I mean, not only that, but he also went after like he actually went after pedophiles too. He went after like Glow Fox and Snake Thing and I I forget the rest, but you probably didn't know that, but he actually does go after pedophiles, and when he goes after pedophiles, he goes like very hard. Like I mean, he really went hard on Snake Thing and Glow Fox and Kira Wolf for raping, pedophilia. Like they've been um they've been raping puppies to death.
oh,
Like they would
Jesus
actually rape a
Christ.
puppy to death.
What God? What the
And they
fuck
would
is
like
wrong with people?
they would engage in pedophilia, but not only would they engage in pedophilia, but they would try to like welcome other people in the group chats to molest their nephew. So it's like not only it's like an uncle raping his nephew, but they would also be like, "Hey, do you also want to take turns, molesting my nephew? Like, I'm willing to share my nephew with you." And not only that, but I think that there was like underground pedophile ring involving them, but they dressed up like cute little furries. And because they dressed up like cute little furries, like you would think that it would be safe to allow them around your kids because I know things like there's like Chuck E. Cheese, and it's like, oh, let that guy from Chuck E. Cheese hang out with your child, or let allow the person who wear the cute little, Winnie the Pooh costume hang out with your child. But they would like live a dark secret life where they, rape kids and rape puppies to death, and or it's kind of like sucking a dog stick into a penis,
Okay.
and it's
Okay, can we stop talking about this? This is getting upsetting. That's fucking gross.
yeah,
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
yeah, I didn't mean to. It's like, it, it was great for Mr. Medicare to target the refuse of society.
Yeah. No, I mean I don't know much about Medicare. I'm not going to really talk about him particularly. Um, but like some of the yeah, I mean I'm not saying I adored any of these people that are on the stream or would agree with them. I'm sure I don't. Um, but what I what I can say is that I think they were absolutely right that this plan that Carl came up with is just it's just dumb. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Why would you even care? Like, are you trying to get Gamergate back, or are you just trying to like vindicate the fact that you wasted so much of your life just talking about Gamergate? Like, is that like what are you trying to do here?
Yeah, yeah. What's his name? Ethan Rod. He was like, "Are you trying to get the band back together? Is that what it's all about?" And he was so like, "Oh, I mean, one of my favorite parts is like, you already. This is from Mr. Medicare. You already asked for my help, and I told you no, Sargon, no." I
Yeah,
mean,
like who it's just who cares? Like if Trump were to say something about Gamergate, who cares? Like what I know that he thinks that the left is so obsessed with it. Like it does get brought up, he's right, but it gets brought up as an not as something that we're like terrified of as a boogeyman, but as something that happened, and that many of the people who were part of Gamergate show up in different conservative and even alt right kinds of places now, like what's his name there, Mike Cernovich or whatever. He was the based lawyer of Gamergate, and now he comes out and he does other kinds of just like far right, getting people like James Gunn fired or whatever. So it's yeah, um, so it's sort of like this. Like from that point of view, it gets talked about, but it's not like it just wouldn't matter. Like even if they were successful, and let's say people on the left got upset and they laughed, okay, like how much time and effort have you invested in this just to get a laugh off of other people being upset? That doesn't even make sense to me. It's just like who's the joke really on? The people who tricked somebody else into being upset about somebody who spent like months of their lives doing that? Like, come on. Like, what would you even be doing this for? Isn't there something else in the world that you could be doing um, with your time? Like, that would help somebody a little bit somehow, you know?
yeah, I have to agree with Ethan Round where he is like, oh my goodness, it slipped my mind. That like it doesn't benefit Trump at all. He pays attention to more current events. He's not going to look into the past, and it doesn't make any sense to it doesn't make any sense to work so hard just for a few laughs. Like nobody's going to be willing to work that hard to like, Mr. Whitaker, he's like, when it comes to Gamergates, I'm looking behind me, Sargon.
Yeah, like it's over. Let it go. Like there are other things that are going on now that you could care about, but like that was a while ago, guys. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, like Mr. Whitaker, I don't know much about him. Like, I've only started watching him recently. I've seen some other videos of him, but I wasn't like not all that interested. But Mr. Whitaker, he's been like really entertaining lately. Now when I'm watching his channel, I found myself to be highly amused, very entertained, and it's kind of like I would just, like spend the whole entire morning with Mr. Medicare. It's like he's just, I find him hilarious. I can't say I know what his political views are. I don't have the slightest clue what his
Yeah.
political views are or what his political leanings are, and he just seems to be content to be just some troll over the internet.
That's kind of and again, I don't listen, but from what I've gotten from other people, that's kind of what it is. Like he's not a person who's passionately involved in politics in any direction. Like he just kind of likes to troll and do his own thing, and he doesn't like he's kind of a one of the he's got that kind of South Park attitude of, just you shouldn't care too much about these things. You shouldn't take them seriously. You should make fun of everybody kind of thing. So I don't, whatever that is, like that's his thing. And I don't even know if I'm representing him right because I don't watch him, but that's just the impression I've gotten from other people.
Well, Mr. Medicare, he seems kind of to be like a true egalitarian because he makes fun of everybody equally. He would tell people, I'm not your friend. He would be like, I'm not your friend, Sargon. I'm not your friend, V. I'm not your friend, Baked. And it's kind of like people would be like convinced that Mr. Medicare is their friend. Like they did last like, no, no, no. It's like, you're my friend, right? And Mr. Medicare tells people over and over again, I'm not your friend, actually. I make fun of anybody. And it's like, like those are usually the people that gets made fun of, or the people who are like, no, 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 Mr. Medicare's my friend. It's like next thing you know, Mr. Medicare makes a video on Beat Alaska. Next thing you know, Mr. Medicare makes a video on V. Next thing you know, Mr. Medicare makes a video on Sargon. It's like, no, I am not your friend. I'm going to make fun of everybody equally. And it's kind of like he also brought up how the skeptics treated harmful opinions. Well, at least the big name ones, of course, because it's definitely going to come from up top. How people just turning on harmful opinions because he talked it about Candid. Trading trust for cash, and how the well, it's the Candace scandal, and Mr. Medicare, he was really supportive of harmful opinions on that issue, and I also am grateful for harmful opinions for talking about Candid. I think that is something that we all should know, especially since they signed a little contract that says that they can't criticize Candid at all, and I don't think that they could even criticize Twitter. I'm not sure, but I think that they can't criticize the AI software used that type of software. So I don't think that they could even criticize Twitter if I'm not mistaken. I think that they would have to cancel their contract in order to criticize Twitter. I'm not sure if I got that right though.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not. Um, I'm sorry. I was I had trouble hearing the last thing that you said. Rin?
Uh, wh- what do you, I mean, where did you stop hearing me?
Um, it was more like you were in and out. So could you repeat the question? Because I know you're like I was hearing Twitter and then like I feel like I kind of
Like, I don't think that the people who are with Candid could criticize Twitter, but I'm not sure because they did sign a little contract, a little agreement saying that they can't criticize Candid, and I don't think that they
Oh
could
yeah, yeah, yeah.
criticize the AI software used to how Candid censors people because I think that
Yeah,
Candid relies on shadow banning.
yeah. Like I don't know a lot about Candid. I do think it was like for people who talk about censorship, they're being really hypocritical. Like that's all I could say about that, but it wasn't something that really affected our community so much. So I think that it was something that we knew that this thing was going on and that it was causing some real issues in among the anti-feminists. But it was kind of like I don't know how to say this without being really insulting, but we my attitude, I'll just say me. Okay, my attitude is a lot of the people who call themselves free speech absolutists are hypocrites. Straight up. Like there are probably one or two that I've met that really are consistent across the board. They care about free speech no matter who's doing it. Most of the time though, when you hear somebody say they're a free speech absolute, they're they let's put it this way, they care about James Damore but not Colin Kaepernick. Like it's not an across the board thing. Like some people's speech is really important to them and they'll go right to the, all the way, and then other people, they don't care. Like they're not going to sit there and support Kathy Griffin. They're not going to support people who are on the left for having their speech that they don't like. They're not going to they're not like, and if people are hypocrites that way, I just don't care. Like I just go, okay, you're a hypocrite. I don't, and I'm not going to pay attention to whatever it is that you're talking about because I don't have time for that. So yeah, I guess it's rude, but there are some people who care just as much, no matter what. They do care. There are people who were anti-feminists who came out when Kathy Griffin did that thing with the Trump head or whatever it was and said, no, that was a joke. Like, if you're going to say that jokes, we're in favor of people telling like really rude jokes and that being okay. Like, why are you not, So I'm as much in favor of that as I am in somebody telling a racist joke or somebody else, like having the right to do that. But for the most part, it's not something it's just, it's only for their own side. And so I don't care. Like, I don't know why I'm supposed to care about that. And I don't.
Yeah, I do think there is a problem with how things come across if you say, I'm a free speech absolutist, and then gets, Chrisiousity and Tim Blake flagged off Twitter. I mean, it's like you say, I'm a free speech absolutist, then why are you flagging people off Twitter? But for me, I like the US law, like, for me, I'm in favor with what we have in the US where it's like against the slanderism, where you can't slander somebody or the heckler's veto. Because I mean, if you because it's like if I'm paying to see a movie, if I just spent some money on a movie, I don't want somebody yelling and screaming throughout the whole entire movie because
Mhm,
then it's a waste of money for me. Or if I pay to see, somebody like if I pay to see, I don't know, Sargon of Akkad or Richard Carrier, I wouldn't want somebody in the audience yelling and screaming the whole entire time, being a heckler because then I can't hear anything. So it's
mhm,
like I'm against a heckler's veto. So it can be a bit paradoxical. I mean, because it's kind of like if a heckler is removed from the premises, then you can actually hear what you paid to hear. And if you paid to hear a person speak, then you would want to get your money's worth.
mm. Yeah, I'm not so I agree with you that it is, if you actually try to put something like free speech absolutism in practice, it ends up being a real mess. And it just doesn't, like when the rubber meets the road, not everybody can speak at once. Nobody will be heard. Like it, so there has to be some kinds of rules of the road. And if one person is threatening and harassing another until they're silenced, that means that person's ideas aren't going to be on the table. But like, so you have to sort of pick and choose, and no matter what you do, it kind of like it gets complicated really quick. And so, and the other thing is, it's funny to me how these very capitalistic people suddenly don't understand how businesses work when it's the business is something like Facebook or Twitter. Like these aren't public company, these aren't public goods that we're using here. These are private companies, and that no, they're not going to have someone like Alex Jones on who's going to get them sued, like and cost them millions of dollars, because that's not what they're here to do. They're here to make a profit. Like if you want a public goods where anybody who is in the public can upload their information, that's one thing. But if it's going to be a private company, it's going to be according to the private company's rules, and that's just the way it is. Like it's not necessarily right or wrong, it's just a fact. So it's kind of like, it's very strange to me, to sort of deal with people who have put out this stance that they clearly haven't really thought through all the way. Like, like what is, explain what free speech absolutism means, and explain how you're going to deal with things like heckler's vetoes, explain how you're going to deal with harassment of people until they shut the hell up, because like that's a problem that's going to happen, and it goes against what your ideas are either way you look at it. So how do you how do you deal with that? And they just don't. So that's, I think, a big part of why they end up being hypocritical, because they haven't really thought about it. Like they haven't really like looked at the inherent contradictions in free speech.
Well, free speech absolutism, because I mean, if you're a free speech absolutist, then there's nothing wrong with a false rape claim. A false rape claim is just more free speech. I mean, or a heckler's veto, slanderism, a call to violence. I mean, if you're going to be a free speech absolutist, then a call to violence is perfectly acceptable, even if it is a credible threat. I mean, if everything goes, then I mean, then everything really does go. You can't go, well, a call to violence is different because the moment you make exception to a call to violence, then you stop being a free speech absolutist. You would actually have to be in favor of, a call to violence or even lying on a contract. So if a company lies to you, then there's no problem with it because lying is perfectly acceptable, free speech absolutism, including, scam, fraud, free
Hmm.
speech, because, we do punish people for fraud or lying, when you're scamming people out of money.
Yeah. Even things like, I mean, if you were to try to go into your town hall today and start screaming the N word at the top of your lungs, they'd call the cops. Like you can't. And so we have this understanding in America that there are things like disturbing the peace, and we have a lot of ordinances in any town. So we've already been dealing with it's not a world of free speech absolutism. We've already put these sorts of things in place, and what we haven't done is been able to really understand how the internet is going to work within that. Like this is where the problem is. The internet is new, and there aren't really rules, and the only rules that are coming from private companies generally, or if you were to deal with different government things that obviously cross their line, like copyright law and stuff. So it becomes a really serious problem because we have to figure out like how we're going to make this work. A guy after the Kavanaugh hearings was arrested because he made a bunch of threats about shooting Democratic senators and shooting weak Republicans if Kavanaugh didn't get through. So, but when they arrested him, he said, of course, that he was just like he didn't mean it. It was a troll or it was a meme or something, like that kind of thing. Like it wasn't intended to be a legit threat, but it's like, no, you can't do that. Like, so there's a disconnect there when it comes to the internet and what the rules are. And for some people, it's like they have just sort of decided for themselves that there are no rules and they should be able to do whatever they want. But then, that's not really what the government is going to do. So it's kind of like, and I made a video. It was a long time ago. It was right after Sargon had done his like his rapey tweets. I wouldn't even rape you, Jess Phillips, and ended up in the mainstream media and everything. He was on the Times, and I made the point then that like if if you guys play this game of going after members of parliament, you're gonna get yourself, you're gonna get us all censored because what's going to happen is the members of parliament are not going to accept that forever. And they have the ability to do something about it. So they're gonna, like, just because I think or you think you should be able to troll government officials, it doesn't mean they're going to agree with you. And, when Angela Merkel goes up to the Facebook guy there, or I told you I'm bad with names or whatever, he can't necessarily just say, fuck off, because he wants his company to be able to do business in Germany. Like, so you have to have kind of a brain in your head about these things if you want, if you actually want the most freedom out there. You have to like be reasonable and say, oh, maybe I shouldn't go after government officials this way. It makes everybody look bad. And most people who are on the ground who hear about that outside of their bubble do not think that's an awesome thing to say to a person 600 times. Like, I've never heard anyone outside of the anti feminist internet bubble think anything but, oh, that's an awful thing. What an awful thing to say. Like, that's what you get from your from the world of normies. So, and the world of normies, there's more of them than there are of either feminists or anti-feminists. To you know what I mean? Like, so you gotta think, you gotta use your brain. But I do think, and I think that this is goes back to Sargon. He's so in his bubble right now, he can't even see what he has no concept of what reality is outside of it. Like, I don't know, does he never like leave his house except to talk to other people on the internet? Like, does he never? Because that's not healthy. Because he is in some kind of weird place with that. Like he thought he won that debate with Carrier. Like, he's like, Carrier had no points. I crushed him on every point. Like, what are you talking about, you moron? Like, you look like an idiot. Are you kidding me? You made yourself look not belligerent. That's what he thinks, that he made himself look just like a belligerent person who was mean. Like, no, 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 my friend. You looked stupid. You looked like a person who couldn't like respond to actual things that people were saying, and all you could do was scream, shut up. That's not crushing someone's argument. That's just looking stupid. Like, it's amazing how out of touch with reality that is. Sorry, that's my spiel, but
Oh, I saw like a video by with Till Deer talking about Sargon and UKIP. It's kind of like I forget what Till Deer says, but it's kind of like, like a lot of the things that Sargon says, like it's going to eventually, what's it, amalgamates and bites him in the ass, because he did make that. I don't think I could say the N word on YouTube, because YouTube, I mean, it would probably strike my channel down if I used the N word, but he used a bunch, the whites N-word comments where he's like, this is not how white people behave, and white people are meant to be polite to one another, and how even with that Richard Carrier debate, how it's like racism was an unironic good for a black community, and how like all of the stupid things he says could just be amalgamated and used against them.
yeah, it's completely stupid. That was, and his point, somewhere in there was a point, and that I wouldn't have agreed with, but it made sense. But it wasn't that racism was good. Like, even if you think that welfare or helping out the poor had a bad effect, and here's why, that doesn't mean, but racism is good, because that's not your two choices, racism or welfare. Like, those aren't the only two choices that are available to communities, right? So it's like, no, you're not making any sense. That's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, and it's like, how do you not know that that is just a stupid point? Like, it's just not true. It's just not logical. It's not reasonable. And I mean, you probably know, I told the MythCon people that they'd be 100% better off. If they really want to have conversations, they've got to stop having him over. Like, because he can't have a conversation that's real. If he's in a debate that actually ends up being a debate, he gets stomped every time, because that's like, his brain doesn't work properly that way, apparently. I don't know what it is that he can't debate people and come up with a cogent line of thought. Not everybody can debate. That's fine. That's not his thing. But like, why even have him on then and have him do debates just to make a spectacle, and so he can say stupid things and the crowd will cheer? Like, if that's what you're doing, that's fine. But That's more like WWF, not intellectual debate. And it's pathetic to me. But of course, I'm not in charge, so.
Yeah, like Richard Carrier, he was laughing the whole entire time, and I cannot blame Richard Carrier for just laughing the whole entire time because Sargon was setting very immature, but he also did a very terrible job at the big Richard Spencer debates. I mean, he
Mhm.
had the opportunity to debate Richard Spencer and crush him on some points, but Sargon did. I mean, it became like name calling. It not only was it's like name calling, but he was just acting smug, and he was like, "Did you read John Locke?" And it's like many Americans haven't read a John Locke. I've never read it, John Locke. I mean, it's kind of like he did a terrible, horrible job at the Richard Spencer debates. I mean, he had an opportunity to do a good job. I mean, the only person who managed to do a good job against Richard Spencer ended up being Styx Hexenhammer.
Yeah, and you could do like the thing about Richard Spencer is he's a highly educated person. He is far more educated than Carl is. He was a Duke PhD candidate who left because he wanted to be racist, you know, and he literally says that. Like he just got to the point where he was so racist he knew he had to make a choice because they weren't going to accept that. So he said he wanted to go and commit thought crimes, right? So, but he essentially studied political philosophy. So no, you're not going to trip him up by saying, "Have you read John Locke?" Yeah, he could write a report on John Locke right now. Like he spent 8 years of his life reading political philosophers. He's kind of covered John Locke at some point. Like that's just, but again, that's that's just the Dunning Kruger effect. He doesn't. It's not like Carl actually studied and knew where Richard Spencer had gone to school or what he had gone to school for or what he thought. Like I would, and I've seen people do well against Richard Spencer, but it's not. You shouldn't assume that you're going to be able to debate someone who's that educated and genuinely has been doing this a long time if you haven't done your homework. Um, it doesn't. And anyway, like Carl, oh my God, Carl considers himself a classical liberal in the sort of John Locke tradition, but of course, he disagrees with John Locke on many, many, many points because, hello, the guy wrote in the that was hundreds of years ago. So you can't just like transfer somebody who wrote a long, long time ago into today and expect it to make sense. But like John Locke was not a free speech absolutist at all. You know, he was much more interested in religious tolerance than than a Carl Benjamin or a Dave Rubin would be, because that was sort of a big thing in those days that they had so many people killing one another over religion that was sort of the solution that they came up with was, all right, we're just going to not fight each other about it. Like we're going to be able to live with each other, and these people over here are going to have their beliefs that you don't like, and you're going to have beliefs that they don't like, and the people over there are going to have beliefs nobody likes, but we're not going to kill each other. That's the rule. Like we're just going to have laws and everybody's going to obey the laws, and we're not going to fight about it. Like that's going to be how we're going to do it. We're going to just deal with living together in a society, even though we cannot stand everybody else's ideas. And so that's a whole different a place where they completely veer off because a lot of what they talk about in terms of of Muslims is completely different than what a classical liberal would tell them to do, like actually in the day classical liberal. So, again, it's this lack of just knowing what the hell they're talking about half the time, um, and not thinking about the things that they think about, not thinking these philosophies that they're talking about through all the way. So they kind of have like, well, now he's a liberalist or whatever that means. And again, it's just nothing. Like, I don't know. He's releasing things on UKIP that are apparently taken straight from what is that movie and book there? Shit. Oh my god, I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. Uh Maybe it's in the chat. The um service gets you citizenship, or um I can't remember. Anyway, I can't remember the name. I can't believe it. Ah, I'm sorry. So, but yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Well, I mean, that was like interesting. Like, I didn't, what's it? Richard Spencer went to Duke and he has a PhD in Duke University and he's,
He was part of their program, and he left right before getting the PhD. I did it a couple of years ago. I did a deep dive into Richard Spencer based on, know your enemy, right?
mm-hmm,
Um, and so like I read things that he did during the Bush years, and things that he had written, and I know um what he's about, and the think tank that he works for, and the books that he puts out, that he edits. He doesn't put them out himself. He doesn't write them, but like one of the things that he does is set up, is publish racist books, so or anti Semitic, sort of Jewish conspiracy theory books. So he's funny because like right afterwards he worked for Pat Robertson right after leaving Duke, and he was too racist, and that was tricky. Like that's it, if you're too racist for Pat Robertson, like that's something. Um, I don't know if you remember who Pat Robertson is. He's a very, very fundamentalist Christian type of guy who ran for president. Um, but that was sort of where he left, and he departed from the Republicans and from the conservatives, when sort of the neocon era came up, because, well, he was against the Iraq War, not for the reason most people were against it, but because he didn't think we should be trying to help brown people have democracy, basically, was what it comes down to. But yeah, like he has been working full time on getting the alt right and those ideas more presentable, um, to society. He wants, um, he is a huge fan of Carl Schmidt, who I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Oh, it says in the it says in the chat that I'm a communist trying to convince you being emotional manipulation. No, they didn't want the Iraq war because it was in the service of Israel. Well, that too, but he also was specifically said things like, "You have a racist in your chat." Hi, Ryan, or an alt right guy or something.
oh, I think that he's just trolling. I mean, that's what I think he's just doing because, I mean, it used to be really popular to just troll the chats.
Mm,
At least that used to be a thing where you just say, fun and silly things. Well, for the person saying it's fun and it's silly. I think he's joking.
Mm, all right. Um, anyway, so where was I on Spencer? Where did I leave off? But yeah, so he had separated from the neocons. He hates the neocons. Um, and it's very so but he has put a lot of time and a lot of effort. He wants the alt-right to be um, accepted within society. He wants this sort of ethno state idea to fly. He wants to create an imperialist white ethno state um, that is based around race. He also believes that in various Jewish sort of conspiracies, they're in charge of banks and that sort of thing. And like he just has these kind of really racist, anti-Semitic, awful beliefs. So, um, but he is smarter and better at putting them forward. Like you have to really uh, like you can't assume that just because somebody is a racist, they're stupid. A lot of racists are. I will grant you that. But not but he's not stupid. Jared Taylor isn't stupid. Not all these people are dumb. And if you just go in assuming that they are, then you're going to get your ass handed to you because, you shouldn't, even though Richard Spencer is absolutely my enemy in society because of what he wants is absolutely not what I want. Like, and not what I think most people do want. He doesn't really care. Like, people don't want a white ethno state for the most part. And God knows I don't. And I don't want I don't want racist policies. I want people who who are of different races to be able to live together happily and with justice and equality. That's what I'm looking for. He wants black people to be sort of deported and put in Africa or something. Um, and that's to me horrendous and terrible and just awful. So that's to me, he is my political enemy, like more so than most anybody. But that's why, because he's my political enemy, I'm going to take him seriously and I'm going to know what he actually thinks and where he comes from because I'm not going to just underestimate him because I've decided that he must be stupid. He's not. And, you know, and just Carl completely Dunning-Krugered himself because Carl is not educated. And that's not in and of itself a terrible thing. If you know you're not educated, you can do something about that, but and he's not really as smart as he thinks he is, clearly. And that's why he keeps getting himself in trouble and getting stomped in debates because he went into a debate with Michael Brooks, who is on the Cedar Report to talk about the regressive left, this concept that people have that there's this thing called the regressive left, right? And the very basic thing that you do in a debate is define your terms. Well, he couldn't define what it meant. Like, how do you go into a debate about the regressive left and not know what that means and not be able to tell people this is what I mean by the regressive left. This is how I define it. Like, he ended up looking like an idiot because he couldn't even, not only could he not prove that there was such a thing, how are you going to prove that if you don't know what it is? Like, if you can't say, oh, there's this regressive left, it's out there. I can't tell you what it is. It's just there. Like, it's ridiculous. So he's just Dunning-Kruger all over the place.
It's so dear. I mean, to the point where you were saying that it's important to know your limits. Till Deer said the exact same thing about Sargon. I was watching a Till Deer video through the kill stream, and Till Deer was like, it's important to know your limits because everybody has limits. And he's like, hey, even I, have limits, but Sargon doesn't know his limits. And I've noticed that myself that Sargon didn't even know how to define social justice, even though social justice, according to Google, is the redistribution of wealth and privileges.
Right. Like, yeah, he can't. He also couldn't define intersectionality. All he can say is they're horrible people and they're out to get you. Like, and that's just fundamentally not the way you you approach these these things. Like, I don't agree with anything that Richard Spencer believes in, but I know I can read what he actually says and process it and say, okay, I understand what he's getting at, or I understand what he thinks the world is like. He thinks that race is very real, very important, um, and that Jewish people have too much control of society. Like, those are two key parts of things that he believes in. Like, if you can't even get that far, like, to be able to define what the people you're against are even talking about, like, there's no chance you're going to be able to argue effectively against them. You're just going to be able to be a jackass and say mean words on the internet about them. Like, and so again, I totally agree with you. He's just not, he's so caught up in his ego of being this self-important guy who thinks he should be, because he has a million subscribers, that he should be someone that, like, should be asked his opinion on feminism. Like, he said that. No, he shouldn't be asked. You don't even know what you're talking about. You have to actually know what you're talking about first. Like, you can have a million subscribers and speak nonsense to those million subscribers and apparently sound good enough doing it that they don't care, but that doesn't make you somebody whose opinion is worth knowing about on a certain topic. I could be a person, I could go on and start just, like, I don't know, talking about car mechanics in a way that's like really funny or interesting, and people could watch me talk about car mechanics, and guess what? I don't fucking know a thing, like, beyond being able to put gas in my car, I don't know shit about that. But even if I were able to collect a billion people, that doesn't mean somebody should consider me an expert on car mechanics. I don't fucking know anything about it. And he doesn't fucking know anything more about feminism than I know about car mechanics. So that's what it is, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's just like for me, it's like I don't know, like my mind got sidetracked to like Mr. Medicare because it's kind of like Sargon has been pissing, Mr. Medicare off, or at least he has been annoying him, and it's kind of a lot like Sargon tends to underestimate people. I wouldn't underestimate Mr. Medicare because didn't he ruin Mundane Matt's career? Like Mundane Matt's used to be really popular, but then Mr. Medicare, started talking about him, and then his subscriber count dropped. Or it's like Mr. Medicare, like he went after a few people. It's like and each and every time Mr. Medicare goes after people, their sub count drop. Oh, like Baked Alaska. Baked Alaska was another one. Baked Alaska was really popular. Then Mr. Medicare decided to start talking about them. It then Big Alaska's channel just started tanking. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of a lot like It's like, Sargon tried talking about Mr. Medicare. And it's like, if you like look at the votes, it's kind of a lot like he got a significant amounts of down votes trying to talk shits about Mr. Medicare. It's like, I wouldn't underestimate that guy. Like, Sargon tends to underestimate people. I think it's because he has a high sub count. He almost has, I mean, he's somewhat close to 1 million subscribers, but I wouldn't, underestimate Mr. Medicare because, usually when he goes after somebody, you see a huge drop in their sub counts.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm sure. Like again, I don't know about the guy, and I'm sure that Mundane Matt did bad things and whatever. I didn't follow it too closely, but I actually felt kind of bad for the guy. Because I I guess I would, but um, because I think that he's somebody that um, yeah, I think he had a lot of emotional investment in his YouTube channel. Like I feel like it hurt him personally. So it's probably um it's probably stupid to feel sympathy for somebody who basically did something wrong and got screwed over it. What are you going to do? But I did. I felt bad for him for whatever it's worth. I don't know. Like, I don't, again, I really don't know much about Mr. Medicare, so I don't feel like I can intelligently discuss him. And I'm not like, to me he seems mean, but like, you know that's probably just his kind of humor, so I'm not gonna judge that. Like, some people like that kind of sharp humor with that's really barbed, and like insult comics and stuff and roasts, and I've never liked that. It always like rubbed me the wrong way. So that's just a subjective thing though.
Yeah, for me, I like how he roasts people, but I don't know
Mm.
much about him either. I can't really say I know a lot about the guy, but it's really funny because he has a really amazing talent at roasting people. I mean, he does such a good job, and he normally does it to people who like really deserves it, like pedophiles, but I won't go into any
Mm.
more details than that because I think I bothered you earlier by going through explicit details of the pedophilia. But I mean, I was really happy for Mr. Medicare, using his trolling skills to speak out against pedophiles and rapists, and whatnot.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to go after somebody, you might as well. That's a fine target. So I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see. I've seen over the years that I've been on YouTube, a lot of these guys sort of come up and get a lot of subscribers or a lot of influence, and then a lot of times they end up shooting themselves in the foot and screwing themselves over. And a lot of that, I think, is that, I don't know, maybe they just start to believe their own hype, believe that they are just these really brilliant, wonderful people who can get away with shit. Like, I don't know. But if and I don't want this to come across wrong, because I've got no plans of doing anything against Mr. Medicare. I don't know anything about him to like dislike him. But to me, I would be concerned about the whole what goes around comes around, because then if he gets in trouble for something, he's not going to be able to ask people to be gentle with him because he's never been gentle with anybody else. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, I think Real said the exact same thing about Smilo. You probably don't watch Hi, I think Real, but he made a video called "The Fall of Milo Yiannopoulos," and at the end he showed like Milo Yiannopoulos asking for people to be sympathetic and understanding. And Hi, I think Real, he said, "Well, you never ever given sympathy, to other people, so you can't really expect it in return."
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to. And like Milo was the shit for a while and now he's not. And, you know, Sargon was the shit for a while and now it looks like he's on a just, I don't know what the fuck he's doing. He's just self-destructing. Even Mundane Matt, who I think was a more low-key kind of guy, he's gotten screwed. So it's like, well, I mean, we'll see. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe this is just, maybe he doesn't have anything to like get in trouble over, but
Yeah, people do just at a certain point they begin to self-destructing. A person could be their own worst enemy.
hmm, yeah. So I don't know. Well, I don't wish anything bad on him, so I'm just that's just my thoughts on it generally, but he probably doesn't care. Like he just does his own thing and doesn't give a shit. So,
Oh, for me, I just like being entertained, like me, I just, like how Mr. Medicare keeps his audience entertained, and that's what I like about him. I just find him very entertaining.
yeah, and like there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, there were people like those Comedy Central roasts, a lot of people loved him. Like
Oh
they
yeah,
thought they were hilarious. So
yeah, I enjoyed the roast of Flavor Flav. I mean, that's got to be my favorite roast of all time. It's like, like I just really, really loved it. It's like, man, but I watched, multiple of those roasting bits, and even the person getting roasted, even they enjoy, even they're like, yeah, that's a good one, thanks.
yeah. So yeah, it's just I think it's just like who you think is funny or what kind of stuff you think is funny. There's nothing wrong with that. So oh. I have like nothing more to say about that for real. Like we have just taken everything that I could possibly say about that out. So
Oh, so I mean, if you want, we could end the live stream if you want.
or change the subject. Either way, it's fun.
Change the subject to what?
I don't know. And I know you probably have to get ready for work pretty soon, right?
Yeah, I have to get ready and dressed for work. Yeah, I have to be, I mean, not too soon, but it's like my alarm is about to go off, and this is alarm for me like to get dressed and, gets ready to like pick like food and like backpack and, take off and, because my job is about it's like what, and about 40 minutes away.
All right. Well, I had a lot of fun talking to you anyway.
I'm glad you did. I mean, it's like, it's like we have our political difference. We are in very different aisles of the political spectrum, but we can still have a civil debate that doesn't dwindle to yelling and screaming and ad hominem attacks,
Oh
It does,
yeah.
you
So
know, it is possible to have a civil conversation with people you politically disagree with. It doesn't need to g- turn into a shit show where all you do is just insult the other person like some type of blood sport.
yeah. Yeah, that doesn't like That wouldn't appeal to me anyway. I would just leave.
Yeah, so that one it really appealed to me anyway because I mean it's fun to watch, but even though it's fun to watch, it's not really fun to participate in. I mean, I wouldn't mind like enjoying it from a third person's points of view, but if I had to deal with it, I would rather just leave. It's like, oh, this person is yelling at me and calling me a coon, an Uncle Tom, and
Oh,
I would if you're
Jesus.
gonna if a person's gonna call me a coon and an Uncle Tom and a gender traitor. I'm just going to just, click off and go do something else.
Yeah, me too. So,
Yeah.
like, well, not that they would call me that, but but names like that, I would just leave. It's not even fucking worth it wasting your time with, really.
Yeah, it's not really worth my time. Same
Yeah.
here.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on your channel.
No problem. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to, present? I mean, we could do your final words.
Final words. Just I guess that it's a good thing that if you're able to talk about ideas and chat with each other and be friendly with people that you disagree with, as long as they're coming from a good place. That's more what I would care about. If they are sincere and coming at you with good faith, that's what's really important, I think, rather than just whether they agree with you or disagree with you or anything like that. So that would be my take.
Yeah, I agree. And chats has been really interesting. I mean, it's like Druid High Priestess by blood. Ryan, it's really nice to know that you are a Druid High Priest by blood. That's been really interesting. I don't think chats has any questions. Oh, Hail Odin. That
Mm.
Yeah, chats is pretty funny. I was laughing at some of the things that were on chats. But yeah, but I have to go to work pretty soon. I mean, not too soon, but I would prefer to get ready to go to work now. So, bye everyone. Thank you for watching.
Bye.